Welcome to episode 71. Here with my all-time friend from all the way from high school. It's been a while. Welcome to my show, Sargam Negi.
Thank you so much, Ivan. It's such a nice, beautiful, beautiful reunion, and it's just a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, amazing. So we'll just start the show then. Let the listeners know a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So, like Ivan said, we've known each other since high school. So, I'm originally from Toronto. I currently live in Australia. I work as a registered nurse. And yeah, I've been here for about 3 years now. So, I work as an
Wow,
ICU. So
wow.
I'm in, yeah, yeah, it's been a while
That's a
now.
long time. Yeah, yeah.
I'm hitting 3 years this month, and I didn't realize that at the end of the month it's going to be a full 3 years since I moved.
Wow. So I guess long term you're staying over there now.
I have no
Or
clue.
you
I
don't know
think,
yet.
yeah, I think after COVID, I just realized that I can't really make a plan for even 5 years down the road without then having to kind of change it up a little bit. So at this point, I'm
Yeah.
open to anything. I think I still have a few more travels before I settle down, so I don't know where it'll be, but I'm liking it here. I'm loving the work here. It's a beautiful country, so happy right now.
Cool, cool. Okay. So just with that, let's just dive into memory lane if you don't mind. Like,
Yes,
tell
let's do
us
it.
about growing up and some of the struggles you had, if you don't mind sharing.
Yes. No, of course, I don't mind sharing. So I've actually listened to a few of your episodes, Ivan, and you've had some amazing people that have talked about a lot of resilience, and it's always an inspiration. But I must say, I don't know if I can really compare. Like, I don't think struggle is even the right word. I think, like
Everyone's
any other
story is different. There's no reason to compare. So
course, no, you're absolutely right. It's apples to oranges. I think a lot of my resilience factors come later on in my young adulthood years. Sorry, Lenny. Um, but I think childhood wise, I had a very, very privileged and lucky childhood. Like I genuinely can't think of a specific struggle. It was a very, very nice time. I think I got a lot more of those struggles per se later on once I went into university. Being a nurse was a really hard challenge. That's probably the biggest challenge. But
so
yeah, growing
what kind of made you go into nursing? Or
so
was that like a did you have a moment where you're saying, "Oh, I want to do this," or like was that just spontaneous?
um I can't remember if there was a specific moment. It's cliche, but I feel like as long as I've known, I knew I want to be in healthcare. I knew I wanted to
Mm,
do something in service. Um, my best friend Jessica Jacob and I, we have this really nice chat where we check in with each other and we talk about our purpose. So we both like to live life with a lot of intention. And one of the things we discuss is how we believe that we have a purpose in life and we feel fulfilled when we're working towards that. And so I think I realized really early on that something that makes me feel fulfilled is caring for others in any capacity, whether it's just, picking up a phone call to a friend and talking to them or actually providing life-saving measures. So I knew I wanted to do something in healthcare, as is she now.
yeah.
And then initially I thought I wanted to do pediatric nursing because I grew
Mm,
up with a cousin who I love and adore very deeply. And he is on the autism spectrum, like he's on the spectrum. So he has autism, and for him, it's not very high functioning. So I grew up with a really early exposure to that. And it was something I felt very, very passionate about, was just helping educate people on that. So I always thought I would go into pediatric nursing so I could deal with child development and enrichment. And then when I moved to Australia, just a little bit before during COVID, I didn't really get a chance to practice as a pediatric nurse anymore because given the state of our country, we had a lot more of a geriatric population. And so
yeah.
most people that weren't already in critical care or geriatric care kind of had to go into that because that's what our country needed at the time, specifically
Yeah,
Toronto.
obviously, yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of cases. And so after that, I kind of went into adult care for a while, moved to Australia, did my master's, and I got a really nice opportunity to work in anesthetics, which is a very unique role that I never thought I'd want to do. But it kind of just
Mm,
opened my eyes that there was so much more to do in my nursing career. I didn't have to just say, oh, well, I went into this because I'm very passionate about childcare, so I only can do that. So I really branched out from there. And now I'm working in an adult intensive care unit, and it's the most fulfilling job I've had in a while. I love it so much. There's so much learning, but there's definitely a lot of day-to-day struggle. Like you see people in the most vulnerable state, you see people dying, you see people who die, and it's horrible. But it's a really rewarding job overall because I finally feel very fulfilled that I'm doing the right thing. So, yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, so you used to put people to sleep then? Huh.
Temporary sleep and
Yeah.
anesthetic, permanent sleep. I don't think anyone ever
Huh?
gets used to seeing people permanently sleep. I don't think that's
Oh
something.
no, no, sorry, I didn't mean. I didn't mean like that. You put me on
Yes,
the
I
spot
used to
here.
put people to temporary sleep for surgeries. Yes, that is
Yeah, yeah,
anesthetic.
that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yes.
So
So I
with my condition, muscular dystrophy, like yeah, I can. They can only use the IV through the IV. They can't use the gas on me.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, okay, tell me about your journey, like in university when you realized you wanted to do this, and how was your struggles, and share us through that journey.
Okay. Nursing school was very, very difficult. I think it's underrated how difficult it is. Just to come, like, obviously it's not the same thing, but I remember
Yeah.
when I was in first and second year in particular, and I would compare with friends that I made in different programs, and I was like, how many units do you guys do? How many courses do you do a semester? I had some friends that would do 3 to 4 courses a semester, and that was
Oh yeah,
completely
yeah, yeah,
load. To
yeah.
give you an idea, in nursing, we do 6 to 7 courses a semester.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was insane. It was so difficult, and I would not go back ever because I'm like, oh, I've made it through. It's okay. But whenever I see a nursing student now, I'm like, I know what you're going through. It's a very difficult challenge, I think, in any profession where you're expected to go right into the role. Like when you think about a traditional undergraduate degree, it's mostly generalized. Unless you're doing engineering or nursing, I think
Yeah,
most of
yeah,
them are really generalized, where they're kind of preparing you for a workforce that you have so many options in. And not to say that nursing and engineering don't have a lot of options, but in nursing, it's very clear that at the end of this degree, you get a title, you're a nurse, and you're going to
yeah,
practice. The specialty can vary. You can go from community, hospital, healthcare, anything really, but it's a huge amount of imposter syndrome when you go from I'm a student that has
yeah,
technically
yeah, yeah,
like the responsibility isn't there. Like even when you start working with patients and you're doing real life things. Like I think the first time in first year university, I can still remember we do an exam called an OSCE, which is similar to what medical students do as well. And you basically get a simulation where you're meant to go in six, maybe it was less than six, but multiple different rooms. And you get a scenario where there's a patient and you have to do a specific type of an assessment. So, like a cardio assessment where you have to listen to their chest and
yeah,
make an interpretation. And you have all these other senior nurses and doctors and they're assessing you. And in that moment, you're like, oh, like if you pass that, you feel great. You're like, oh, I can do this. And
yeah,
then next year, when you go and do it on real life people, it's
yeah,
a whole other factor because you go from playing operation to if I get this wrong, is this person in danger? And
yeah,
the real answer is yes, not to make any more pressure. But that's in the back of your mind. Even when someone tells you it's okay, you're a student, there's another senior nurse, there's another senior doctor, there's someone else, there's always someone you can depend on. It's a very scary feeling of this is no longer fun and games. You're actually dealing
yeah,
with livelihood. And I say this to my friends all the time when I have friends that complain to me about their job. I tell them I'm not trying to diminish at all what you're going through. I know it's like you said, everyone's struggle is real, everyone's struggle
yeah,
is
yeah,
different.
yeah,
But sometimes I think back and I compare and I'm like, well, if this person messed up in their job, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe like someone needs to revamp a file, like a financial file, for example. I'm sure there's a lot of very, very stressful financial roles. But sometimes I think back and I'm like, if I mess something up in my job, could someone die? Maybe. And that's a really scary thought. And especially in nursing
yeah,
school, it's so new, it's terrifying. And I feel particularly bad for people my year and the 2 years following that went into nursing because we were very new to the workforce when COVID happened.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Go from, nursing students and then within 24 months to go into, there's a lot of people dying. There's a very
High
serious
intensive,
sickness
yeah.
that we know
Like a
nothing
war
about.
zone almost for you guys.
It honestly was. Like when I think back to it, I have a lot of PTSD from COVID. And sometimes when I tell people in Australia that, for example, when I first moved here, COVID wasn't really a thing. And by that, I mean, In Queensland, where I live, there was
Yeah.
little to no cases. Some parts of Australia, like WA, Western Australia, didn't have cases. So they really thought of COVID as this far-fetched, different reality.
Yeah.
And to them, they couldn't fathom what we were going through. Whereas in Toronto, having 3,000 plus cases in just our city, me personally, I watched a lot of people die. And it was a very jarring experience. So when I moved here, and I had a lot of fear around COVID. So when I would go to the hospital and work and someone would present symptoms of COVID, I would instantly start to feel a lot of anxiety. And my fellow colleagues would say, "Oh, well, it's just a common cold. It's fine." And I was like, "No, I don't think you realize people die from this, and they die a horrible death." And there was this shift of, they were like, "No, I don't even know if it's real." And I'm out here thinking, this was the worst thing I went through. I feel like I went through a war that I didn't even know I was signing up for. And then I
Mm.
survived. I felt so lucky. And I came back, and people are out here being like, "Was the war really real? Did people really die?" And I'm like, "No, I promise you they did. And it's horrible that I have to justify it." But it was really difficult navigating that in the healthcare system here, because I don't know if you know, it might not be a very well known fact, but in Australia, they initially had made it mandatory in 2021 around mid year that to be a healthcare worker or anyone that was in direct contact with vulnerable individuals, you had to be vaccinated with one vaccine, or you had to have the intention of having a vaccine within 7 days. So they made a
Mm.
very public statement. That's my cat. I'm sorry. I have a cat and I'm dog sitting, so it's a lot happening in my household right now. Um, but yeah, so they made a very public statement and they expected everyone to get on board. And you would think, as healthcare workers, we're very evidence based in our practice,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
everyone would
Yeah.
be happy. But because a lot of people hadn't had the faintest idea of what COVID was and the exposure it was creating, there were quite a few people that just said, "No, I would rather lose my job than get vaccinated." And that was insane. I couldn't wrap my head around that, they were like, "Oh, we're not anti-vaxxers. We just don't think we should be forced to do something for an illness that we don't know the reality of." And so that was really shocking to me. It was really sad. I mean, I've seen healthcare workers themselves that ended up in the hospital a year later because their lung collapsed. A healthy 35-year-olds with a lung collapse saying, "Oh, yeah, I got COVID." And I'm like, "Oh, that's really unfortunate. What did you do for work?" And they were like, "Oh, I used to be a nurse here, but I left the job when they forced me to get the vaccine." And I thought, well, surely now you can see why it would be really important to get it. But yeah, it was a very, very tough time, and now I'm
Yeah.
really grateful that we're much further removed from that. I mean, COVID is still a thing, but it's no longer the scary, scary reality that it used to be. Yes,
So
Letty.
what kind of helped you get out of that like mindset, or like did you have some limiting things, like even like growing up, or like how did you overcome that?
I don't know if I did completely, to be honest, Ivan. I wish I could say that there was this lovely tunnel that I traveled through and I saw the light at the end and I thought, "Oh, now I'm great." But
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
still feel like my breath hitches when someone tells me they have COVID, even though now it's like
Mm.
saying you have the flu. And
Yeah. Yeah.
in Queensland, we get 5 days off as healthcare workers if we get COVID. And, when one of our patients was exposed to it, we get a call at home saying, um, "You have to wear a mask for the next few days," and all that stuff. But it still scares me quite a bit. I definitely had to go through a lot of therapy for that. And it's built a lot of resilience where now I'm like, okay, well, I feel like I've dealt with the worst thing ever. So it can only go up.
Mm.
So I've had to change a mindset to be a bit more positive. And I guess the one silver lining was it did equip me to deal with a lot of trauma really early on in my career. So now I do feel like I'm well equipped when I handle things. Like when I'm in the ICU and I see some really horrifying things that I wouldn't hope other 20-year-olds, people in their 20s to see. I feel a bit more
Mm.
mentally strong where I'm like, "You know what? I know what this is like. I know how to comfort the patient. I know how to comfort the family members." So I guess that was the one silver lining, was I got that exposure really early on. So I kind of had to build a little bit more of a tough skin on that.
Yeah. Therapy definitely helps.
Oh yeah, I think everyone should get therapy, whether you have a specific issue you want to talk about or not. Just I think therapy is great for everyone. I say that to my family all the time.
Yeah, because not everything you can share with everyone.
Absolutely. And on top of that, sometimes it's better to share it with a stranger who's a professional, that can just give you a little bit sense of guidance almost. Because let's be real, when you talk to your friends, you can have a different responsive answers. You can have the friends that aren't really listening, they're on their phone and they're just like, not really
Mm,
a great conversation. You can have the friends that are going to support you no matter what. Like I have some friends like that and I love them, but it's not really healthy when you turn around and you say, well, I've done this horrible thing and I feel bad about it. And your friend's like, it wasn't horrible. You did a great thing. Don't worry about it. That's not realistic either. And like it's great you
yeah,
have
yeah,
supportive people, but that's not the point of therapy. So I think it's a great resource for anyone and everyone that can utilize it. They should.
yeah. Amazing, amazing. How do you like Australia? Like, how's life there?
It's really interesting. Oh, okay, guys, you need to stop. My cat and my dog are just having a field trip today playing. Okay,
Oh
now go
yeah,
play with Fleur.
we can just annoy her and then.
Okay, bud. Go play with Fleur. Go play with Fleur. Sorry, what were we saying? Australia. So
Australia, yes.
I live in Brisbane. I've lived in
Yeah.
Brisbane the entire time I was here. I've done a few bit of travels around. So I've done WA a few times, which is Perth, and it's a very different part of the country. It's kind of like it's half the country almost in size, and it's very unique that there's only one capital city there. And I love WA. It's one of my favorite places in the world. So I travel there quite often, and my goddaughter lives there. So I always have a good excuse to go there.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, it's kind of nice actually. I've created a little sense of community and family here, which I didn't have for the longest time. So I started to make it a little bit of home, definitely. And it's beautiful beaches, it's beautiful hikes. I've got a lot of my friends and family to come and visit me, and I'm trying to convince as many people while I'm still here to kind of move to this side of the world because I love the environment, I love the place. I just miss my loved ones so much. Like it's not the same as home. I miss
Yeah.
Canadian culture. I miss the people. I miss my dog. My dog's back home with my family. So there's
Mm,
always going to be pros and cons about moving and
yeah, yeah,
restarting
yeah.
somewhere else. But it's a lovely place. And anyone in healthcare, I would recommend in a heartbeat. It's a really good healthcare system to be working in. I feel like there's a lot of support, especially for nurses. I didn't feel that the Canadian system was as strong for the workers. And I've had this conversation in the past 2 years with a lot of people, doctors, nurses, many different specialties. And unfortunately, I think our system in Canada just isn't as well equipped to support the workers. We have a lot more of a shortage. Our population is also a lot bigger. So obviously, that's going to be a factor.
Yeah, yeah.
Australia is also an island, literally. So it can isolate itself very well, which is what happened during COVID. It was great at handling it because they don't have to shut down their borders the way we do. They don't neighbor another major country.
No, they don't.
So they have a lot of privilege here that works to their advantage. And so working in the healthcare system here is really nice and I love it. So that's definitely one of the main reasons I'm still here is I love the work. I love what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really nice. You should come and visit. It's a really
Okay.
beautiful country.
Yeah. So like just to wrap it up a little bit, just gonna wrap it up now. In your own definition, then take your time with this.
Okay.
What does limitless mean to you?
Ooh. Actually, I was chatting with a friend the other day about this podcast, and I said the name Limitless, and they said, "Oh, like how so?" And I said to me, I think it represents your resilience in that despite having the traditional limitations, let's say being in a wheelchair, having a chronic healthcare condition, which people would consider a limit per se, I think it's a perspective of resilience where you don't let anything limit you, you don't let anything define you. It's something I always say to people when they label someone based on a healthcare condition. So, for example, for my cousin, I would get very defensive when people would say, "Oh, isn't he the autistic one?" And I would say, "No, he has autism. But when you define him as being the autistic one, you're putting him in this box, you're limiting his capabilities. And it's not to say he doesn't have a condition. Of course he does, but it's just a portion of him." So to me, limitless is you taking a box away of any labels you could have and saying the world is my oyster, essentially.
Wow. I love that. Love that. Love that. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Ivan. It was really, really nice. And I'm sorry that my cat and my little baby
That's
dog
okay.
here have been such a nuisance to chat, but thank you so much for having us.